What's going on, Summoners? Welcome back to another Wild Rift video. My name is Kangas, and back in Minnesota, we have a saying. You can pick your friends, and you can pick your nose. But you can't pick your friend's nose. And more importantly, you can't always pick your teammates. But there are ways to increase your chances of winning, so let's go over them today.
So let's start off by talking about why you should even think about your team when you're playing Wild Rift. The simple fact is, it's a team game, and you have to rely on 4 other players whether you like it or not. These tips will give you some options for keeping a game under control. Remember, you don't have to do all of these things, just do what you think you need to do in any given game. Some games you'll type out a plan for your team to follow, and others you won't do anything but play your own game. But before we start talking about how to make the most out of any solo queue team, our question of the day is, how do you win games when your teammates aren't playing well? Do you try and ramp it up and carry harder, or do you try and get everybody communicating and on the same page? Let us know in the comments down below. We're always curious what you have to say. So, if you want to make the most out of your team, you'll have to pay attention to the small details both in and out of the game. That's right, you can start thinking about improving your team's chances of winning as soon as you get into Champion Select. Wild Rift has 5 positions to fill on the team, and the people that you're matched with won't always fit these 5 roles perfectly. I mean, how many times have you played a game with a support who just doesn't do anything in lane? There's a big chance that they're not actually a support main player. To help increase your chances of winning, it's a good idea to start a small conversation before everyone locks in their champions. Something as simple as, "Hey guys, I prefer mid or jungle," goes a long way. This is important in both normal and ranked games, and they'll help put everybody on the same page. However, make sure that you do have a champion or 2 in other roles that you don't always play, just so that you can switch to it if you need. When you and a teammate do end up switching roles, don't get upset if they aren't playing super well. Taking a chance on a teammate isn't always going to go well, and there is a chance that you might have lost the lane too. Just remember that you can't carry every game. If you know that one of your teammates is filling a role that they don't usually play, it's best to expect a bit less out of them and try to play around everyone else on your team. For example, if your Baron laner isn't familiar with the lane, you should probably spend more time on the dragon side of the map. Okay, so now that everyone is going to play the role that they're most comfortable with, a good next step is to talk about your team composition and playstyle. You're given time in Champion Select to talk with your team, so use that whenever you can. Having a versatile champion pool gives you a huge advantage for building a better team comp, since you can fill multiple roles in the team. If you play a Mumu and Xin Zhao in the jungle, well hey, you can pick both a tank and a fighter to round out a team comp. But try not to pick something that's out of your comfort zone, even if it would make your team really strong. It's better to pick a champ that you're good at instead of what someone else wants you to play. The last thing that you should talk about with your team is team strategy and gameplay. For example, you can let your team know that you'll be playing very aggressively in the dragon lane, drawing attention to yourself. This way your team can play around you or focus on getting pressure on their own. You can also talk about early game invades and wards. If done right, you can get some easy kills and even jungle camps. Never underestimate how far a pre-game plan can go. If you enjoy talking about the best comps in the meta, you should definitely check out our Wild Rift Discord in the description down below. We have balanced discussions all the time, and you can find some fresh faces to queue up with when you're sick of solo queuing. You'll also be the first to know about giveaways and prizes, so go check it out. Now, once you've laid the groundwork in Champ Select, you should start thinking about what strategy best suits the kind of team that you have. This is where your understanding of the macro game comes into play, and you'll have an easier time telling people what to do if you actually know what to do. If you aren't very informed on how to play a comp, don't worry about it. Every game is a learning experience, and maybe a random Tryndamere ends up showing you how to win a game by split pushing for 20 minutes. If you want a little bit of macro knowledge before you start leading your team, we'll talk about 2 of the most common paths to victory: teamfight comps and split push comps. Teamfight comps make use of powerful area abilities like Misfortune and Annie's ultimate abilities to win big battles and get a lot of advantages at once. Most players default to playing a team fighting composition even if their team isn't suited for it. In Wild Rift, there's always a fight going on, so powerful team fighters are some of the best champions in the meta. On the other hand, split pushing comps are a bit harder to play. These comps focus on moving your opponents around the map and forcing them to respond to your pressure. You'll slowly gain the lead, and eventually your split pusher is too difficult to handle. Camille and Fiora are 2 iconic split pushers in the game. You need extremely powerful 1v1 potential in order to split push effectively. One thing to remember is that some compositions have multiple ways of winning, because if we're being honest, these are not the only 2 styles of play, and you'll need to learn as you go what works best against certain teams. So now that you know 2 types of team compositions and their macro goals, we can talk about the strategies and things that you can do to keep your team on track. We'll talk about how to win through communication, objective control, and overall just keeping a positive mindset. When it's possible, we'll use some team fighting and split pushing examples so that you can know what to look out for in the game. The first thing that we'll talk about is communication, and it's probably the most important part of making the most out of your team. Communicating in-game is kind of like doing it in Champ Select, except that you need to play the game too. It won't be easy to effectively type to your teammates at first, and sometimes you won't even have to. The ping system is the best way to quickly get the point across without needing to type anything. For example, let's say you're playing a team fighting comp, but you're one of the backline damage dealers and you don't have any way to start the fight on your own. You're facing a split pushing comp, and the longer you sit around, the more turrets Fiora is going to take down. If your Malphite just won't ult and start the fight, don't be afraid to ping the enemy team, especially the targets that you want to focus. Something I like to do is just spam the on my way ping to get the same point across. This shows that you want to go in, but you're not necessarily the best at starting it, so hey, somebody else go in first. Pings are great for in-the-moment decision-making, but typing to your team is a more passive approach that usually works better in the long run. For example, you can type to your Malphite and tell him that if he sees two people standing close, he should just ult them. Or you can just tell them that you're really fed and that you will win any fight that they start. This way, you're planting the seed for the right play in their mind. Not only will this save you from having to ping all the time, but you'll also help make somebody else a better player. When you're trying to communicate with a team that's split pushing, your focus is more on stalling for time and giving whoever is in the side lane some space. In this case, you should ping back your teammates if you see them walking up too far. If your team is recalling, ping your split pushing Camille to be careful, since the enemy team has time to come and catch her. You can get the same thing done by typing this out to your team, letting them know that your goal is to let Camille split push and avoid team fighting. Usually you'll use a combination of typing and pinging to effectively communicate with your team. For this reason, we suggest that you get comfortable with pinging and use it as often as possible without totally spamming your teammates. Once you make some good calls in the early game, your team will begin to trust your pings, giving you a lot of control of the direction of the game. If you mess up, don't get discouraged. Everyone makes mistakes, and you'll have to totally throw a game or two before you really learn your lesson about focusing Baron. Speaking of Baron, your ability to guide your team to objectives is crucial if you plan to shot call the game. Wild Rift is all about getting advantages, even if you have to make sacrifices along the way. For this reason, let's go through the best ways to approach objectives with both a team fighting and split pushing composition. For any team, getting vision and setting up for a fight is crucial, and you might need to tell your team when it's time to do these things. It's a good idea to make sure you've recalled at least 25 seconds before Dragon or Baron spawns if you plan to contest them. You want to do this so that you can spend all your gold and then go with the rest of your team to get vision together. If you don't plan your recalls well, you won't be prepared to contest a neutral objective. I like to tell my team that they should try and recall about a minute before a major objective spawns just to get the idea in their heads. And again, don't be a jerk about it. Just remind them, hey, Dragon's up in a minute, we should spend our gold and then get vision around there. Usually this will work. When you're playing with a team fighting comp, try to ping your team to follow a path to get to whatever objective that you're going for. You have to stick together and play the fight correctly, and that usually means getting the first engage on the enemy. If you find yourself dancing back and forth with the enemy team while their Tryndamere is getting your Nexus, make sure that you ping somebody else to recall and stop him. Now with the split pushing comp, the most important part about objectives is your ability to judge when you can even do them. Since you have two sources of pressure spread across the map, your resources are also spread out. If you notice that the enemy team has sent 3 members to fight your Fiora, just spam ping Baron, Dragon, or just anything that's on the other side of the map. Making full use of your pressure is how you win the game, and if your Fiora dies for Baron, well, that's totally worth it. The last thing we'll talk about is keeping a positive mindset in the game, especially towards the rest of your team. Now I know sometimes someone is playing really badly, but trust me, it isn't worth it to spam ping and flame them. It might feel good in the moment, but you're just decreasing your chances of coming back and winning the game. No one likes to play poorly, and your 0 and 10 Yasuo has feelings too, and they probably know how poorly they're doing. With that said, it's totally fair to ask somebody in a losing lane to play a little safer, but try and do damage control instead of just getting mad over somebody else's gameplay. And verbiage is everything. Don't say, "Stop dying!" ! Instead, say, "Hey, try and hug your tower, and then the jungler will help you out when he can." Sometimes you won't always agree on the same play when you're playing the game. Like we mentioned before, teams can have multiple right plays, and it's important that you don't get too stuck in your own gameplay. Try listening to somebody else's calls, especially if they're playing well. And when things are looking totally lost, remember that it only takes one big play to change the entire game. Wild Rift is designed to be explosive and change in an instant. It's easy to mess up when you're ahead, so look out for your opponents getting too confident. If you see any plays or have some ideas, ping or type them out to your team. If you know that Dragon is coming up in a minute, you can stack in a bush with your team and surprise one of the fed members of the enemy team. Then that next 5v4 fight could just win the game, and it would never happen if you didn't get your team to follow your call.
So remember, you don't need to make every single call on your team to win the game. Every team's gonna be different, and knowing when to take a passive or active role in your team's communication is how to get the best out of any given team. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to subscribe to the channel, and also don't forget to answer our question of the day and check out our Discord in the link below. Thanks for watching, everybody. Best of luck on the Rift, and I'll see you next time.